Welcome back to the Keri Croft Show. In this episode, I sit down with Kirk Barton. Kirk's a former Ohio State Buckeye football player. He had a short stint in the NFL, and now he owns a Buckeye media outlet called Buckeye Scoop. Kirk's the kind of guy that'll say things out loud that most people would not. It's a quality that likely contributes to his polarizing persona, but one that I find oddly endearing at times. Part of Kirk's story that I didn't know until this interview is that he lost his dad to cancer when he was just 12 years old. Knowing this puzzle piece shifted my perspective on this unapologetic, controversial guy. True to form, Kirk gets candid in this interview about pretty much everything. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the Keri Croft Show. Kirk Barton, welcome to the Keri Croft Show.
It's great to be here.
It's even better to have you here.
I'm excited.
You are a presence. You fill up the whole room. You're a tall dude.
It's great for intimidation. It's bad for trying to ride roller coasters.
I can see that. Is your birthday November 4th?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what sign you are?
Scorpio.
Do you know that type of personality? Do you know what being a Scorpio, like what kind of personality traits you have?
Just crazy, like sex crazed lunatic. Like, I mean, that's like, because Chris Rock in his one song, No Sex in the Champagne Room, said like, Scorpio, you're going to die like effing. Like, it was kind of like the funny punchline at the end of his song. But yeah, I kind of know what it is. It's like, it's passionate, crazy, whatever.
The whole sex part though, do you know the sex part? On the surface, it's like, oh, you're really sexual. But if you peel back the Scorpio, it's because they want affection and intimacy, and they're highly sensitive.
Oh my God!
Did you know that?
Maybe they got it wrong then.
And maybe they need to reevaluate the signs.
Yeah.
And then do you know you're a water sign?
There's water signs? Mm-hmm. I don't know. I have no idea what a water sign is.
You're a water sign. You are sometimes misconstrued as a fire sign, but you're actually a water sign. You and Kim can look that up later. She'll be, yeah. But I digress.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't know there were such things as water signs.
Yeah.
So learned something.
So have you been watching my show?
I watched my man Bobby George. Okay. That's my favorite episode just because he's my guy.
Okay, so with Bobby, the first thing I did was kind of take a trip down memory lane.
Oh, yeah.
Because what I like to do... Because for me, my childhood impacted so many things and had so many imprints on my life, made me who I am. And that's kind of what I like to do.
Yeah.
And so I know for you, early on in your life, you experienced trauma. Mm-hmm. I would like to say like probably the biggest trauma a child could experience, right? With the passing of your dad.
Oh, yeah.
And you were what, 12?
Yeah.
You were just a wee boy.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably the worst, maybe mom would have been worse or both, obviously, but it's tough because like when you're the traditional nuclear family and it's dad's the breadwinner, mom takes care of the kids, and then the breadwinner dies, all of a sudden it's tough. And, and your dad is one of my heroes. I talked to him yesterday and, you saw what his career turned into. He became a monster and he's one of the greatest businessmen I've ever met. He was the CEO of Harley Davidson. He was the COO of Johnson Controls. Global monster, best operations guy in the world. And like, what if he would have passed when he was 39? Mm-hmm. What would he have become? Like, I mean, all that prime earning from 40 to 65 or whatever, you don't see that. You don't get that. And you've got sisters. And I mean, you guys, kind of, reaped some of the rewards of it, of the fact that he was really successful. But, you lose all that. So, but again, it's one of those things where I think that when there's a great tragedy, there's a great opportunity where it's like you have to learn how to grow up fast and harden up. And, like the biggest lesson I learned is no one's coming to save you. Yeah. So if something happens in your life and it's like, whatever it is, you go through a divorce, lose a job, kid gets cancer, whatever it is, knock on wood, like whatever terrible thing is, no one's coming to save you. So you better stockpile money, save yourself, work hard, do right. And then the rest takes care of itself.
Yeah. And you mentioned success, which is important. But going back to when you're 12, I mean, you're basically just hitting puberty then. You're just a little boy.
Yeah.
Your dad's gone. There's no one to throw the ball with. There's no one to ask questions to. I think it's those moments too, not just like what would my dad have become from a business perspective, but like what would our relationship have become? What would I have learned when I was 13, 14, 15. And that has to kind of be just one of the biggest voids that you could possibly experience as a child.
Yeah. I mean, you like, I'm illiterate when it comes to any sort of mechanical things. He was real, he knew how to fix motors, engines, transmissions. Like he owned a huge commercial landscaping business in Naples. So, you see how those things are blown up and how Naples is blown up. Like he would have been crushing it. You know, he was one of the first guys down there, and he had some huge accounts. And so I didn't learn a lot of stuff that how to change your oil and stuff. And again, like that's not a big deal. But there's sometimes where you'd like to have a guy who has your best interest in your corner, and you could ask him anything, and you lose that. So that's tough to come back from. But it's something that you find kind of pieces of older successful males that you talk to, and they've kind of become your sounding board. Like I've got five guys in my life that I could ask anything of and any question, and I would trust their advice from just their wisdom and their experiences.
Because I was wondering, because I know my dad mentored you, I think when you were in college, and I was always like, wow, he really does like my dad. And I didn't know what had happened with your dad. And that made so much more sense to me, because when you see someone like that, it probably brings all of that back up for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, he just is he's so like down to earth. Now, I mean, he also is, he was, I mean, he's the boss, and
the boss hog.
The boss has to do some hard things sometimes. And, when he took over Harley, I mean, it was about to be government motorcycles. They're about to be BK. And he saved the whole thing. And he did it by chopping heads off and by burning down factories that weren't working properly and building new ones. And a lot of the stuff he did wasn't popular, but it saved the company. And they went into a period of tremendous growth because of his leadership, his foresight, his, and again, like when you're a leader, you're not always going to be popular. Most of the time, you're probably not going to be popular because you're pushing people to do things that they're not used to doing, or to places that they're not used to being, and being more productive, being more efficient. And he was like masterful at that. Again, he was the first non-Harley or Davidson family member to run Harley Davidson. So
you're stealing all my thunder for my podcast. I mean, I don't even have to have him on in April.
Well, I'm just saying, it's like, so like when you're that, because like he literally said I was the best operations guy in the world, CEO of Johnson Controls, best operations guy in the world. So he was so good that they broke the family tradition, because they're like, we need a guy that can actually save the company instead of it just being someone's last name. So, but that's, your dad's, he's my guy. Like I call him all the time. Like I called him yesterday, and he's just always been so good to me. He's the guy he's like one of the guys I'd ask a question to if I need an answer, and he's always been great.
Boss Hog's coming in April. He's going to come put the smack down on the podcast.
That'll be great.
So when you and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about your dad and your experience, something you said that really stuck out to me was, I don't know if I would have been as successful in my football career had that not happened, because I had so much anger. So your dad passes away. You're 12. You're moving on. When did you realize, like, I'm a really good football player?
I mean, it wasn't until I was probably a junior, senior in high school, because I started going to camps, and you go to camps I went to Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and you go against guys that are names and you've heard of them before, and they're rated really high, and you beat them, or you're as good as they are, or you're better than they are. That's when I got more confident, because I just kind of, because back in the day, there wasn't YouTube, internet was kind of limited. So recruiting was very limited. There was a couple database websites, Rivals and Scout.com. And, you saw guys and heard of guys, but they weren't all, they were cracked up to be, it's like kind of like if you like did the CrossFit games and you watch all these people on the Netflix show and you're like, man, they're amazing. Then you go and sign up for it, and then you're like shoulder to shoulder with them, running with them, beating them. You're like, wow, I can do this. Like, I mean, you think that people are like they're on some sort of pedestal because you've just heard hype about them. Then you go against them, and you're like, yeah, they're not really that good. I could be every bit as good, if not better. And I ended up better than most of them.
Do you think you always had a chip on your shoulder?
Oh, always. This is how I operate. I've always been like that, just because, you like to prove people wrong, and you like to, I guess, I'm trying to think of, you want your ambition to far exceed your talent. Like it's something like that in Johnny Depp's movie Blow. Like he says that my ambition far exceeded my talent. Like that's kind of what you want to be known for is like, you go do something and people's like, oh, you can't do that. Or there's no way that that'll happen. And that won't work. And then,
like, try me.
Yeah. Or then you do it. Like, it's like you started, a fitness, movement with System of Strength. And it's like, well, how are you going to do that? And there's Orange Theory and there's CrossFit and there's regular gyms and there's small gyms and there's personal. It's like, why would you ever do that? There's no way you'll do it. And then you do it and it's like successful and all of a sudden it takes off. And then guys like Bobby George want to buy it because it's a really good brand. So, like you kind of find your own motivation sometimes because it's like when you're an entrepreneur, like there's times where it's dark and hard and you got to figure out ways to do things that you don't know how to do.
But the chip on your shoulder where you're kind of like, I don't know if it's antagonistic, but I could definitely, I can sense like being on a team with you was probably interesting, right? You're a force. Do you think the chip on your shoulder was just DNA? You just had that your whole life, or how much of that contributed to your childhood?
I think a lot of it was because of the childhood, just because like, I'm glad that I grew up kind of uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
You're not comfortable. You don't have everything that everybody else has, and you don't have certain things just because you don't have it. So, because that's something I struggle with two kids is like, how much do they get? We have a nice living situation right now. So it's like, how much is too much? How much is, you want to keep them hungry and tough. And, it's like, I don't know. Like that's something I struggle with right now as a dad. And and like when I was a kid, I didn't have a choice. It was like, you better go figure it out and go tough it out, no matter how bad it seems or whatever.
So when you were really good in high school, you started to get recruited. Mm-hmm. Who were the top schools recruiting you? Who were your like top three?
Ohio State, Stanford, Northwestern. I liked Vanderbilt just because Tennessee. But Nashville's like boomtown now, but it wasn't back then. But I liked the academic schools just because I knew how prestigious the degrees were from there.
Yeah.
I loved Stanford. That was like my dream school, other than Ohio State. But like
so,
they gave me a full ride, and I said no.
Because you wanted to go to the Ohio State University.
Well, the part of it is when you have a single mom and you go to Palo Alto, you'll see her once a year.
Yeah.
You go to Ohio State, she can come to every home game. She can come to most of the road games are drivable. Michigan State, Michigan, Penn State, Indiana, Purdue. Like, it's like, it's just a lot more cost effective.
Yeah.
Which is, again, that's just part of haves and have nots. Like, if you've got, a dad that runs a big company in Naples and he can fly wherever he wants, he can go to every home game, every away game. But that was important to me. Like, I wanted my family to be able to see me play. And again, that's something that a lot of kids deal with, but it just kind of depends on, do they have the means to fly in every weekend or fly wherever, or versus the opportunity. Plus, Stanford wasn't good at football, So that was the hard part. Is like this is back when they stunk, and like you're gonna get a great education, but you're gonna play USC and lose like 72-0, and like that's kind of just a miserable existence. Because I wanted to win, because I knew I'd be miserable if we didn't win. And when you go to Ohio State, you're favored in 99.9% of the games you play. So like, this year they think that it might be the first time they've been an underdog in the Big Ten in, I don't know, some crazy, like 10 years or something. Because they project the Michigan games. The Michigan's going to be a slight favorite. So, when you go to Ohio State, you're going to win 99% of your games, usually.
Well, I like that you bring up your mom as a determining factor, because I can imagine that you stepped in as the man in her life. Right. And so you had a responsibility, or you wanted to make sure that your mom was cared for. And if she's only going to be a couple hours away, I think that shows a lot of maturity. And
yeah, because I had a scholarship when I was in 4th grade, because Florida public schools have this thing where if you're like an elite student, you can get your school, like 4 years of college school, or excuse me, of university in the state of Florida paid for. So you could go on to Florida State, Miami, or any of the smaller schools, FAU and Central Florida and those. But, we had to give that up. My sister had this, she would have had it too. She's 2 years younger, but they would have given it to her too, because she ended up being valedictorian of her class. But we had to give that up to move to Ohio, where the family was, because the family was kind of like the helpers, her parents and her brother and my cousins. And, they all kind of helped helped us.
Your mom needed a system of strength.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
You know?
That's a good plug. But it was just, when you're in Florida, you don't have any family, and it's just like you have friends, but friends aren't the same as family. And people, when you go through something traumatic like someone passing, and then you've got this kind of screwed up family where it's a mom and brokenhearted and 2 kids, like people eventually don't want to. I mean, they still want to come around and ask, but it's kind of like one of those things you're saying, like if I can go out and have dinner with my family or go see these sad people that have, lost everything, like, I'm just going to go have dinner and kind of pretend they don't exist. And again, that's just human nature. Like I don't blame anybody for that,
Yeah.
but that's just, like when someone's suffering, like how often do you want to be around it when you've got your own problems and your own issues and whatever? So it's just
as the world turns.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, people, this is kind of how it is.
Yeah. Okay. So you choose Ohio State and was it 2003 to 2007 that you played?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's go back and think about the first time you put that uniform on and got to run out. Was that a moment? Because I wish I would love to just put the uniform on and be able to run out at Ohio Stadium for a home game. That would be like bucket list for me. Do you remember? Was that like the adrenaline? Was that amazing?
Honestly, the only thing you think of, because it was a grass, is just don't fall. Don't fall. That's the only thing you think of. Because when you're a freshman, and I was redshirting, so I wasn't playing. So it wasn't the same magic that you normally think of when you run out of the tunnel. When you're not going to play. I mean, the whole extent of your physical activity when you redshirt is running out of the tunnel. You got to run like 40 yards and then you're done for the day. So it's like, the biggest thing is you just don't fall. Don't be the idiot that falls. Don't get trampled. When I got better the next year when I was a starter, I was at the very front of the thing. And people were like, it's because you want to be on camera. I was like, no, it's because I don't want anyone in front of me to fall down and then I fall on them.
Yeah.
So it's like, because, if you're running and you have the choice, like if you think of like a marathon or a pump and run or whatever, if you had the choice of either running in the front with nobody in front of you or in a big giant clump where there's people all around you, of course you want no one in front of you because you don't want to trip and fall. That's literally all I ever thought of when I ran out of the tunnel is don't fall down. Don't fall down. Don't get bit by the turf monster. And because people fall down it seems like every week just because, I don't know. But it's I know it's exciting and people like dream of doing it, but I just man, I don't want to fall.
It does look very glamorous.
I just don't want to fall down. That's all I thought about.
So how did you handle, because I remember when I was at Ohio State, the football players were like, wow. I mean, there's nothing cooler than an Ohio State football player. And your people know who you are. You're huge, right?
Yeah.
How did you handle, because I have my own opinions on how I think you probably handled it, but I want to know how you handled like the attention. I guarantee girls were flocking and people treated you a certain way. How did Kirk Barton circa 2003 and
long time ago.
How did you handle it? And there's no wrong answer. I mean, I would have handled it horribly.
You just try to. I mean, you never blend in. You're this big, but it's just like you try to keep it as focused and calm, and the tension's great. But my second year, I moved to Hilliard, so I wouldn't have to be on campus. I wouldn't have to be down on off campus or any of those houses because I wanted a quiet place to live where I could park my car in front of my house. That was the biggest. So there was an apartment complex. That was great. So I didn't really get the full college experience, because most guys are like, oh yeah, I lived off campus right there at that crappy house. And we'd go to Papa Joe's or where Alcatraz and they'd go get drunk. And, I was just always focused on I want to get my rest. And again, I'm not saying I was a church mouse. I mean, obviously went out and had fun, but when I wanted to be able to rest, I want to be able to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to go to bed, I don't need there being a house party or, some frat party or whatever. So I don't know. I dealt with it just, I'd always try to be courteous and kind to people and whatever. But, there's varying levels to being an Ohio State football player. If you're Ted Ginn, that's way different than being me. Just because I'm a lineman, nobody cares about linemen. You're big, that's great. But if you're Ted Ginn, and everybody's hounding you and chasing you and taking photos with you. Thank God, camera phones were just starting to become a thing. But, if you're Teddy or Troy or one of those guys or CJ Stroud or a guy that's a recognizable face because his face is always on TV, then that's a whole different ball of wax than being me. 85% of the team, people don't know who they are. but they're really good skill guys. People obviously know who they are. And now it's like it's an even different level because these kids have so much money, so they're flossing. They're dressed in the word Montclair and Balenciaga and stuff to class, and like
different world.
Yeah, they stand out a little bit different now.
Yeah.
But no, I just always try to like just be nice, and you know, I always would gauge like the first day of class when I go to a class. Does the professor hate football players? And there would be ones I could tell right away that this is going to be a long class, and I would try to switch professors. Like if it was like, you know, English 900 or whatever, you know, or one of my history classes. Like if I knew that he was going to hate football players, I would try to switch. I try to keep the same class, but just get a different professor. I did that a few times just because there's some that just hate football, and you're just like, why would I fight this fight when I know that if it's a C- or a B, you know, B- or a C+, I'm always going to get the lower of everything. I mean, then on the flip, there were some professors that they didn't love football, but they were really nice. So you try to take all theirs. I had a lady named Lynn Haggerty. I took like 5 of her history classes because she was so nice, and she passed away a few years ago. But you know, I don't know. It's a double-edged sword with the football thing because there's some people that love it, and there's a lot of people that hate it. You know, especially like the academics that are at Ohio State. They don't all love football, despite the amount of notoriety and attention and money it brings in.
Yeah.
But you know, they'll take the donations though. Like if you're like the College of Arts and Sciences and you're hosting all your mega donors at the Ohio State Michigan game, like they'll take the money from that experience, because that's kind of what they peddle. They say, well, if you donate here, then you get this. You get to go on the sideline, or you get to sit in the suite, or you get to do whatever. So,
did your career at Ohio State go like textbook? Is there anything you look back on and think, God, I wish I would have done that different? Or whether it was interpersonal relationships or a play or anything you look back on and it kind of haunts you?
Well, I mean, obviously we lost 2 national title games. So that was like devastating, terrible. But
did you cry?
No. I cry when someone dies. I don't cry over a game. And again, I'm not trying to be like Mr. Hard Guy, but you know, it just, you know, it sucked. And I mean, you know, with Florida, I mean, we were out of it. It was 41-14. So it was just kind of like, you know, by the end, you're just like, God, I'm glad it finally ended and they didn't score like 100 points on us.
I was at that game.
Oh, I'm sure. No, everybody who's ever heard of Ohio was at that game. And I've had to explain what happened. And like, I honestly don't know. We just didn't play well. We played poorly and we ran into a buzzsaw, and it happens. Like it happened when we played Bama in 2020. I'm sure you're at that game. And like, you're like, oh, we're going to go play Bama. And they beat us like 52-14 or whatever it was. And you know, it happens sometimes. Yeah. And again, that's the thing about like when you play football, like everybody gets whooped. You know, Nick Saban's been whooped plenty of times. Like, you know, I mean, he lost the national title game to Clemson, lost to Georgia. So it's just part of the game. But you always want like the perfect career is national title, All-American, draft pick, you know? And so I got 2 out of the 3, which was good. But, you know, you always want to win the Natty. That's like the thing that everybody wants to do, but it's hard. I mean, God, we've won 2 in like 50 years. Since 1970, we've won 2. So it's like, if that's your bar, you're always going to be disappointed. No, there's going to be 2 years, you're going to be euphoria, but you know, it's tough to do.
Now, you're speaking of being drafted, your NFL career wasn't very long, right?
No.
What happened there?
You know, I bounced around. I had a bunch. I mean, I tore my hamstring my second year. I had all these weird injuries. I hurt my knee at the Senior Bowl. And again, I probably just wasn't good enough. You know, again, like if you can have a million injuries, but if you're good enough, you're good enough. But, you know, it's hard because when you go to the NFL, it is a business, especially, you know, everyone always says that. But it's like you're not playing for people that you care about anymore. Like when I played at Ohio State, like I really cared about Jim Tressel, and I cared about Jim Bowman, and I cared about, you know, Ohio State, you know, the people that support Ohio State. You know, my best friends like Anthony Gonzalez and Troy and Ted and TJ Downing and all these guys, AJ Hawk, you know, guys that I really like, you know, you feel like a duty to them to strap up and play hurt and shoot your foot up with, you know, painkillers. Like I had a broken foot in 05 and I missed like 2 games, but the rest of the time they just shot it up and I played on it. And it hurt. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're the best option, even if you're out there hurt. But, you know, when you go to the NFL, like that all kind of goes away. Yeah. It's all like independent contractors. It's all kind of mercenaries. So like you lose that, like you're not going to go to the wall for your head coach in the NFL like you do for Jim Tressel. Like Jim Tressel's like your dad. Like the guys that are, you know, at whatever team you're on, they're just kind of like, you know, they're like your managers. You know, like you're not going to do the same things that you do for your dad that you do for like a manager. This is kind of how it is. But I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. And again, this is
different.
It's not an alibi, but when you really are like motivated to play for others, like, because money never mattered to me. Money was, obviously the NFL is amazing and all that, but it's like, when that's all you're playing for, it kind of, I don't know, it's not the same as when you're playing for your buddies and your school and that type of thing.
I'm going to call you on this. Money never mattered.
Well, I mean,
is that true?
Well, it does. I mean, obviously you don't want to live under a bridge, but it's like, I've just always like found out like when I just chase happiness and I'm happy, it's better than just chasing dollars.
Yeah, but so you get the opportunity though that 99% of the world doesn't get, which is to go in the NFL and have a couple of years where you get paid more than some people get paid. And so did you have anyone in your life saying, Kirk, this is a finite amount of time, save this shit and invest it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Or did you go out and buy like a Lambo and like act like a weirdo?
No, my first car I bought, I paid for in cash. It's like $15,000.
You were smart. You were smart about leverage that.
I never spent money on like anything until
you weren't flossing
until I had a real job.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like with my career, as much as I bounced around, like I never could buy a house. I was staying in like extended stay hotels and renting cars. Like when I went to San Francisco, it was cheaper to rent a car than it was to ship my car out there. So I just rented like a Toyota Yaris. So that's the opposite of flossing. That's like, the worst car in the universe. I get literally the cheapest car. And I'd get like a 3 or 4 star hotel that was close to the facility and stay there because I didn't want to sign a lease because I had to break a lease when I got released by Miami. It was kind of a procedural thing. They wanted to bring me back on Monday. They released me on a Friday. They had to sign a guy to play that week at fullback, and I ended up getting claimed on waivers. And if you get claimed on waivers, you have to go to the new team. You can't say no. I want to stay in Miami. It's like no, you have to go to the San Francisco 49ers. So, I'm like, I got an apartment down here. I got my girl at the time down here. We had our cars down here, our dog. And it's like, I was like, well, do I have time to pack? And they're like, you got to be at the airport in 4 hours and move to San Francisco. Like I was never back in Miami again. Like, so you got to leave everything behind. So I don't know how you do it if you don't have like a girl or your mom or something. Cause it's like, I literally would have to leave my dog behind. Like, what am I supposed to do with my dog? Like, just leave him there? I can't take him to a hotel in San Francisco, but that's like kind of that's the part of the NFL people don't see, like on the bottom end of the roster. It's not all Tom Brady and the top. There's a lot of guys that are just trying to make it, and it's a grind. And again, I enjoyed the NFL. Like, I mean, again, it wasn't a long career, but I met great people and I had some great coaches and great experiences. And you start off your life, you've got a chunk of money, you're debt free. Got my little cheap car, a little Monte Carlo, it was paid for in cash. And I was scared of having a car payment. So I just paid for it in cash and it was done.
So when you left the NFL, I can imagine there could be potentially some sort of life crisis because you're at Ohio State and you're living that life, which is very privileged. And then you go to the NFL, which is amazing, and you're identified as this football player, and I'm sure you get treated a certain way and you feel a certain way, and then it all goes away and you have to figure out who Kirk Barton is post football. Was that a big deal for you? Not a big deal? How did you transition into just being Kirk?
Well, I started volunteering for Tress because I asked him if I could be a quality control coach, which they make $2,000 a month or whatever. So it's not like it's a big ask, but he's like, here's the deal. I'm going to have you volunteer for free for 3 months. And then, if you're good, we'll keep you. And I was like, great. So like, as soon as I was done, I was on staff at Ohio State in like a volunteer capacity, but I was like basically helping with the offensive line, helping run the scout team. So there was no like, what am I going to do next? Because then I got the idea to become a GA because a graduate assistant can actually coach on the field. And then I wanted to get my MBA paid for. So I went to night school at Ohio State at Fisher, got my MBA done while I was coaching. And then, when I was done with my MBA, it was either stay in coaching or get into business. And I picked business because I like I just like the quality of life. I mean, and again, you have to work hard at business, obviously. You know how much your dad traveled and all that. The higher you get up on the food chain, you got to go hit the jets and do your thing. But I liked business more than coaching. Coaching is tough on families. Obviously, the biggest thing about coaching is obviously the salaries have exploded. They make a ton of money now, but it's not great for your family life generally. I think that most of the families suffer in coaching, and I could be dead wrong. Maybe everybody's loved it, but that's kind of the thing I've always gotten, where you're kind of like a widow. You're like a football widow. That's like a big term, and I like being able to do stuff like see my kids. Like I don't want to miss anything in my kids' games or any of that. And when you're in football, like it's such a rigid lifestyle that you have to miss it. If they're playing on a Tuesday and you got a game plan or whatever, you're at the office till 10. You miss everything.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a great glamorous job, and they get paid very well, and it's nothing to complain about, but it is a sacrificial job. In my opinion, you give up, everything comes second, third, and fourth. So you have to have a spouse who understands that and can be the CEO of sort of this while you're running that. You just have to figure it out like anything else.
And it's glamorous until you lose.
Well,
because I mean, after we lost to Michigan last year, man, it was not glamorous to be an Ohio coach. They're making great money, but like that's kind of it. Because I mean, the kids got it. Because when you lose, like the kids got to deal with it at school because kids are bullies and they know that your daddy is this coach and my daddy said that your daddy sucks. And so I've seen that firsthand from kids that were they were some of the prominent coaches at Ohio State. So I've seen their kids get like ridiculed in tears. Like the 2013 Michigan State game, like I saw some of our defensive coaches' kids get ridiculed and crying, and because again, like people don't know, your daddy sucks, and again, like your dad was prominent, super intelligent, did fantastic, financially in his career, but like, I don't think that you got harassed if he screwed something up the way that like a coach does.
No.
So, and I'm sure he screwed up a million things because I mean, when you're making big decisions, like they're not always going to be perfect. You're not God, but that's this. I like business. I actually like privacy. Like people don't like. I just love. I go home. I do my thing. Do my podcasts. Work out. Get some more work done from my day job, and it's all that.
Yeah. So let's parlay this into, you mentioned Fisher College of Business, and you chose business, and you are currently doing the Buckeye Scoop.
Yep.
Okay. So when did the Scoop start?
It started, it's been like 4 years now. We just had an idea to make an independent board. And we thought that, we kind of scoped out what would be the model, and it's been great. I mean, obviously we've had a few transformations, but it was, it's just been fun. Like it's fun. It's fun owning something and growing something and knowing that you directly reap the rewards as opposed to working for somebody else. Like you always work harder when you own it. Just because
it's your baby.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's how I look at like the Scoop and Bucknuts and all you male, I'm gonna say men. I'm sure there's women out there that are freaking fanatics too. But I feel like when I watch like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever, that's my fix. I feel like you guys have your own form of like reality TV. Like it's your own soap opera or something. And so what I'm trying to figure out is the only thing I know about Bucknuts is from my dad. And my idea is just that it's this place you go and it shows you like who's getting recruited or whatever. So help me understand, like, do you guys do the exact same thing, or how do you differentiate and compete, and like what, like, do you want to find out who's getting recruited before them? And like, how does that all work? Or am I over like sensationalizing it?
No, I think that's pretty accurate. There's always kind of like a scoreboard of who breaks what story. How important is the story? Like there's two very prominent NFL insiders, a guy named Adam Schefter, a guy named Jay Glazer. Schefter works for ESPN. Glazer works for Fox. They both break NFL stories. And ESPN literally keeps a scorecard of, does Schefter get it? Does he get beat? Like, it's part of his compensation. Like, how often is he breaking news stories? How significant are the stories? Because not every story that you break is significant. Like, if it's like something, like a coach gets an extension or a raise or it's an assistant coach, like nobody cares. But if it's like I broke that Quinn Ewers was he was going to reclassify and come to Ohio State. And that was a massive story. We broke, my partner broke that USC was going to join the Big Ten. Massive story. I mean, that's a groundbreaker. We have a guy now that is like at the forefront of all the expansion talks. We actually had a thing today about Oregon and Washington, really getting close to joining the Big Ten. So We want to break news. We do it in a thoughtful way. We don't like to go with bad news. So if a kid tears his ACL or a kid fails a drug test or a kid gets arrested, everybody else can break that because we're not in the mood of breaking that kind of stuff because we just don't care. And again, like we kind of always try to skew positive. So we don't, if a kid, transfers or whatever, like, I mean, that's okay stuff, but it's not positive is always better. Kid committing is great. New, starting quarterback's been named is great, but just, there's some stuff that we don't care for first on just because it doesn't matter. And if it's bad news, we definitely don't want to be first on it because people, they show up to have a good time. We're kind of like a nice restaurant. Like there's a restaurant, like if you go to Town Hall, for instance, and like, you're like, oh, I like to go there because I know the people there. They're great. The food's great. Vibe's great. It's kind of like a digital version of a country club, so to speak.
Okay. So if I Google Kirk Barton, I can see some things that have happened in the last couple of years, right? And I would like to give you the opportunity to discuss this in your own words and what you feel like, from your perspective. So my understanding is that you and I don't know if it was the other guy, what's his name, Nebraska, what's the guy's name? Wait, do we not talk about him?
Nevada.
Okay. Should I call him his real name?
No, it's called Nevada.
Nevada what?
Buck.
Okay, so you and Nevada Buck, okay, you're partners. And something went down where you were walked off the field, the practice field, and potentially lost your media credentials. So for me, and I know nothing, so this is what I want you to help me understand. If you lose your media credentials with Ohio State, does it really affect what you're doing with the Scoop? Or how does that, because I would think, well, shit, I can't go to practice. I can't see this stuff now.
Yeah.
How does that impact the situation?
Well, I mean, you have to understand, like, what is a practice when the media is able to actually go to practice. So the media probably gets to go to practice 3 times a year, 4 times a year at the most. And generally when they're allowed to be out there is like the beginning of practice where they specifically don't show anything. So it'll be like stretching period or it'll be like, just some innocuous, punt drill or something. So they never get to glean anything interesting from it. And, I've never been credentialed. None of my partners have ever been credentialed. People that work for us have never been credentialed. We just don't think it's valuable to the business. And that's the thing about what we do is we're about, breaking news. We're about inside stuff. And, I don't think the credential is valuable.
So it doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter at all. There's sites that are credentialed that have no following at all.
Does Ohio State look at you and or any of your competitors like a pest? Is it a conflict of interest for them that you guys do what you do? Or are they kind of like, okay, this is just the way it's going to go?
I think there's always a fine line. I think that, I love Ohio State, but they're very guarded with what gets out, and some of the stuff that we get out is stuff that it's just the way it is. So I don't know. It's interesting because it is kind of a conflict of interest, but that's just part of being a big program in the eye of the media.
Yeah. Well, so another question for a dummy like me again. So I'm peripheral with all this, but when I was reading about it, it said like something about schemes and formations and you guys trying to get that information. So here's the question I have though. You love Ohio State.
Yeah.
So what would the benefit be if you did see like a new scheme or a new play or something? You wouldn't like put that on the Scoop, right? Or would you? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out is like what benefit would that be to you or would it?
We have never disclose any type of scheme or any sort of thing that would give an opponent an advantage because our entire livelihood depends upon Ohio State being good.
That's my point.
So if Ohio State loses, I lose subscribers. My board becomes toxic. So I root harder for Ohio State to win than anybody on this earth because when they win, people like to read about Ohio State. If they turn into Akron and they go 2-10 next year, that's terrible for my business. So I would never do anything that would hurt Ohio State in a way that would make me lose subscribers. Because again, like, people don't want to read about, there's a reason why there's not an Akron Zip scoop. There's not a,
right.
There's Purdue websites that have, a couple hundred subscribers because no one cares about Purdue football. No one cares about lower tier schools. You know, the reason why Ohio State can support, God, there's like, 20 sites now is because the following is that it's that crazy, and if they start losing consistently, then it hurts. Like when we lost to Michigan, it was terrible for my business.
Did you lose subscribers?
Of course.
So is your subscriber base, are you allowed to say how many subscribers you have? Or is that kind of like a thing you don't talk about? It's confidential.
Yeah.
Because then I could just figure out how much money you make. I can say, okay, what's the subscription? How much does it cost to subscribe?
$12.99.
$12.99?
Yeah. And for a year, it's $139. So you get like a year free.
And you have no overhead.
Well, I mean, we got to pay for our site, hosting.
But that's not a lot.
Domain,
I mean, that's nothing
tech.
though.
Yeah,
I feel like the margins for that kind of thing is really good.
It's more expensive than you'd think, just because we had to buy a bunch of equipment. We had to build the site. That was expensive. That was way more expensive.
But we did too. I have a digital studio. I feel like the margins are just crazy.
I mean,
do you want me to look at your P&L, Kirk? Do you need a consultant?
Well, here's the thing: is like I mean, we have talent that we have to pay. So so it's like you got to have good people working for you. You got to have people that bring in. The biggest thing is getting great information because that's what we deal in. Plus, we deal in community. Like we have a great community, which that's the best part is we're heavily moderated. So it's not a burn board. It's not crazy, and like a lot of those places aren't moderated the same way.
So here's my question. So some of the stuff on Google that's trying to paint a picture of illegal activity or being shady or whatever. What do you say to that? You just call bullshit on that, or do you say like what part of that do you own? Do you not? Like what's your overarching sentiment?
It's all been exonerated. I think it's all fabrications. And again, I'm happy with where we're at and we're on the up and up. And again, we've got great sponsors. We have a great community. We have great people around us. So, I just, when people write pieces, like I just always consider the source and that's kind of it.
But isn't like any press is almost good press sometimes? Or are you like...
It didn't hurt us when people were like, well, these guys are getting so much information that, they're trying to get shut down. I mean, that didn't hurt us.
Right.
And this is part of the gig. Like, I mean, you're an insider. Your job is to get inside information. So we do it and we're good at it. And that's never going to change. Do
you and your partner get along?
Yeah, fantastic.
Do you have do your skill sets sort of complement each other? You stay out of each other's way?
Yeah, no, we work together. I mean, we talk every day, constantly.
What are your plans for the Scoop?
Just keep growing it. Keep growing the digital. People love our podcasts. I mean, we podcast constantly, almost every day.
You gonna have me on your podcast?
I would if you want to talk football.
I'll 100% talk football.
The thing I've learned is if we don't talk about the current Ohio State team, people will just...
I will 100% talk football.
Okay. I'll have you on.
I mean...
We'll see how you
Let's
test.
take a poll with your community and see if they want me on.
We'll have a test. We'll have a test episode. Because that's the thing. The beauty about what I do is the views don't lie. Views don't lie. Watch time doesn't lie.
What's your average number of views per YouTube?
We get about 10,000 or so. And we've had some that have gone up to 70. We've had, we have clunkers that'll hit 1,000. I mean, pretty much anything gets 1,000 that we do. But I mean, that's, you make like $10 on 1,000. So that's not... but when you start getting the ones that are 10, 15, and we've gotten good at them. Like we've gotten better and better. Like we've got the same microphone you do. We've got kind of the same setup, a little bit of a different camera setup. But you put a lot into the production quality because you want people to be proud of the production quality that you have. It's not just like a hacksaw operation, so to speak.
Any thoughts of doing any other teams, like fill in the blank Scoop, or expanding that way?
There was a point where I wanted to do that. I just, you got to have people on the ground, there. I think it's helpful to have people that want to do that. I thought about consulting and helping people build their own sites because, I just think that it's a way to own something that's fun. I always wanted to work in sports, and I think the easiest way to work in sports is to build your own thing than it is to be working for, like The Fan or some other network, because the problem with being like a former player is there's always a crop of players coming behind you that wants to do that ESPN analyst job or that NFL Network analyst job or that Big Ten Network. And there's always kids that'll come behind you that'll do it for cheaper because they're starting off. So that's why you see a lot of these guys get out of it, because there's some guys that hit it big and they're major talent and they get re-upped, but That there's guys that kind of like get, they get kind of pushed aside. They get older, and there's a younger guy that's more notable at the time. So, and you see that across the board because there's always a crop of like former Buckeyes or former whatever that want to do media. They want to try it. They want to do a podcast, and it's just more fun to do your own because then you have full control and you don't have to worry about someone saying, well, this guy said he'll come in and do it for $15,000 less a year than you will. So do you want this new salary, or do you want us to hire him?
Yeah,
that's kind of how it works in the industry.
Yeah. So your wife, Kim, right? How long you been married?
It's gonna be 7 this year.
Now has Kim, like many good women do, kind of lassoed you down and tethered you and made you a little more, shall we call it docile?
Yeah, I would say between having kids, getting older, kind of that whole thing, it should make you more docile. Like I don't go out, I don't golf, I don't belong to a country club, I'm not real social. Like I'm generally at home by 6 at the latest.
Has it always, is that just an evolution within the past couple years? Did you kind of like, or have you always been super like reclusive?
I've always been pretty reclusive just because I don't, like it's just, when I was younger, you go out a couple nights a week or whatever. But, when you get older, man, it's like, God, you're like the old guy in the club now. You don't want to be that. Like, I mean, if I'm going to do something, I'll do like a happy hour or something like that. Because then, you get home at like 5 or 6, you get your kids, so you can't, not going to be out running the town, at 10 o'clock at night. Like that almost makes me like, it's like the last thing on earth I want to do. Because like I said, I've got everything I need at my house. I've got my podcast set up. I've got, my office. I've got my exercise. I got my gym. So I got to the point now where like I don't have to go to the gym anymore. I don't have to go out to meet people. I work all day doing that. So like when I'm home, I like to be home.
Well, you're creeping up. You're almost 40.
No, I know it's 39 this year. It's crazy.
Right? So now that you're becoming a little more long in the tooth, as they call it, are you doing any self-reflection? Like, do you feel like, I look back and maybe I've been a little or chip on my shoulder. Now I'm kind of trying to be more like the water and not the waves, or what? I mean, I know I do a lot of self-reflection. I try to, but I'm just curious, like what in your mind is your sort of path of evolution, and what are you trying to soften? What are you trying to change and tweak in that head of yours?
There's always things that you want to do better. You want to learn how to do more things. You wish that you would have learned certain skills earlier in life, especially like sales. I always tell kids, like, get into sales. You get into sales, you'll always have a good job. You always have bread, so to speak. So it's, I just always kind of figure out, and again, I don't like to waste time like reflecting on stuff, but it's like, God, why didn't I start a YouTube channel 20 years ago, or 15 years, when I came out in 07? Like, why wasn't I at the cutting edge? So you kind of like change how you do things, because you're like, well, man, what's the next wave, the next evolution? Because, like I worked in this industry for someone else at a different site. We never podcasted, and we started doing podcasts, and we make pretty good money doing it. And I'm like, why didn't we start this 10 years ago? Why didn't we, what took us so long for the light bulb to go off? Why didn't we go and start our own site 10 years ago instead of working for somebody else for much less? I mean, there's always things that you look back on and you're like, I think the more you can work for yourself, the better. I think that, or if you work in I work with Reichert, and I work with some of the greatest guys in the world, and Rick Reichert's literally one of my best friends. So it's, but you work with, you want to be around good people. You want to see your trajectory. You want to be kind of incubated by good people. Like, surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself by people that do better than you. Most of my friends are old just because they've been around, they're successful, and they've learned lessons that they can teach me that I won't have to learn myself. And a lot of the lessons, are painful, and do this, you should do this, or this would be smart for you to do. And that's kind of like the point in my life where if I can't learn from people, I don't really have time for them anymore, just because it's, your time's so finite. You're only here for so long. And like, if you're not learning stuff, then it's all like Bobby. Like, every time I'm around Bobby, I learn stuff. Bobby's a smart guy. and he's just been just a tireless, crazed worker. That's how he's wired. And he's a guy that, he's been ultra successful, super down to earth. You'd never know if you met him what he is, what he's worth, what he owns, like. But guys like that are guys that I just love being around because and I love supporting him. Like I like going to Mandrake and I like going to Town Hall. Like if I go out, I go to Mandrake or I go to Town Hall because I feel like I'm giving my money to a guy that I really like, a guy that sponsors my website, a guy that believes in me the way I believe in him. And I always compliment him and say how great it is. And when I have meetings or luncheons, I say let's go to Town Hall because then I'm introducing new people to Town Hall because he's just such a good dude. Like I feel good supporting good people.
I picture you like, and I just started laughing because my friends used to call me Frank the Tank.
Right.
Because it was like, all of a sudden you're one person and then the next thing you know, you're like turned up. It was like Frank would come out.
Yeah.
You remind me like you would, but you would, no, not of Will Ferrell, but I would think, and you could tell me if I'm wrong. I've been wrong many times. I would think like you would go to the Mandrake. I mean, maybe not now, but like you'd go out and then like all of a sudden it would be like boom, boom, boom. And then you're just fun. Like trying to be low key, but then it's just not in your nature.
I try to be, and again, like I always dress down. I'll wear this to Mandrake. I'll wear a hoodie and like showers, like flip flops and mesh shorts. Like I look ridiculous when I go out because I'm not like trying to look glamorous or look like all bougie, but I just kind of get in my own little world. I just kind of chill, relax. I always love seeing the people that work there because I know them. Like I know the guys, the GM there, they're great people. And like sometimes like when you work like crazy, like, you want to cut loose and relax a little bit. And that's just part of the gig. I mean, you want to have fun. I generally do it out of town more than here just because, it's just, I don't go out in Columbus very much. I really don't. I'm almost 40. Like, I mean, come on. What are you doing? Like, you go out, you're just like, oh my God.
Yeah. Well, you've gotten yourself into some trouble being
TV
out, though.
bopper night. Yeah, that was
and we can keep that in or we can take it out, but it's out there.
That all got dropped.
No, I know, but
got dropped and it got expunged. So make sure you put that in bold.
No, I will. But you know what we should talk about because before you explain this to me, when I saw the video. Yeah. Well, let's back up first. I'll just discuss what we're talking about. So, what was it? Right before COVID, you were at the Bogey.
Before COVID, yeah, I guess it was. Was it? I don't know what year it was. It had to be like 18 or 19.
Okay, so it was a couple years ago. But you're at the Bogey, enjoying some beverages, having a really good time until you weren't having a good time. Yeah. But then you're like, well, I'm so big. I got in the car so you can explain it. But it looks like you kind of just really didn't even mean to do like. To put hit the cop or whatever.
No, of course not. Like the last thing you do in life is
mess with a cop.
Mess with a cop. I mean, they have a license to arrest you and throw you in jail. But like, I was there. It was a good day. I was trying to. My wife calls me and says, "Hey, dinner is up. Get home." I Ubered there, being responsible. Ubered. I was going to cab home, responsible. Not, So. And I get in this cab and like I go to like turn my arm and like I swing the door shut and it bounces off this guy's arm and it was a cop and I was like, I didn't see that the guy that was the taxi cab driver had my license and he couldn't read it, like literally because his eyesight was bad. Because I said, hey, just put my my address into your GPS because he didn't speak good English. So I was hoping he could read English and type it in. And he hands it to the cop because he can't see it. And then the cop like puts it like this and like he's got his arm in the door. And the whole time this happens, I don't see it because I'm trying to reach for the thing. And I go to slam it and it bounces right off of his arm.
And
I was like mortified. I was like, what are you doing? And then like, it's just like the end of days. And then when you're in that situation, you just give yourself up and
of course.
I mean, because that's like the thing is you don't struggle. You're Prince Charming at that point. You just sit there and you go through a little bit of a trial there, but it ended up fine. Like I said, all the charges got dropped.
Well, but the media, as with anything, they're like sharks with that stuff, right? So Kirk Barton. So I remember seeing it. Like I'm like, Dad, Kirk was at the Bogey. What happened? And I'm like, wow. And you saw it on the video, and then to hear you talk about it, like it's like, well, shit. Like I Ubered there. I was being responsible. Like wrong place, wrong time. But then you were in jail for 3 days.
Oh, it was amazing. And I was there from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, got out Monday. And, you know, if people haven't been to county, and again, it was Delaware County, so it wasn't like hardcore stuff, but you know, it's not fun. And like anytime I tell people that, you know, when people get sad and depressed, I'm like, just go spend a weekend in county jail and you'll never be sad again.
I know you told me I haven't been sad since I got out.
No, because my guy's like, I can go eat Chipotle and I can go watch movies and lay in a bed that's comfortable and I have nothing to be sad about because I could be in county right now. Because I did that and I was like, I think every teenager that gets sad and depressed and go spend a weekend in county. And it can't be like something that you plan for. It's like, no, they just got to snatch you and put you in there for 3 days. And then
that'll help.
You'll get out of there and you'll be like, man, I'm never going to be sad again. I can go eat what I want and watch TV. And I have my phone. Because like, you know, people are so addicted to technology. Like you don't check your phone. You know, you don't. I mean, it's just like a different, you know, everything's taken from you. So it's just like, you know, time just kind of sits still for 3 days.
Real talk. How much of your thought process during that 72 hours was consumed with the fact that Kim was going to kick your ass? Percentage.
I mean, not a lot. I was worried about, is it getting out? Like, is it going to make the news? Because it didn't make the news until after I got out. So I was calling her every 6 hours or so in the can and, hey, did it make the news? Is it on the news? And then as soon as I get out, as soon as I get, you know, bailed out, it's on the news. It's on 5 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, 11 o'clock news, YouTube, every website. So it was...
That has to feel really weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you know, and then you're just kind of, you know, how do you explain it to people? Like people are asking, people are, you know, like people were watching the video at my mom's work and it's just like, you know, I mean, whatever. They don't know what to say to her because they're all embarrassed. Because again, like people have been in situations before, but most of it's not public. You know, it's not played on the news. Like if someone gets like, you know, gets arrested or something bad happens, like it doesn't play out, you know, for that moment in time on the news. Now, granted, you know, it's like the next day, I don't know if LeBron went to the Lakers the next day, or there's like the next day, there's like some big story that gets washed away where nobody, you know, you think that, oh my God, this is all everyone's going to watch. And then the next day it's like nobody even cares. But, you know, it was just one of those things, you know, and again, like, I don't think you talk about size being an advantage in football, like it's not an advantage, like when you're out.
No, I agree.
People know, you know, they just wonder who you are. And I've had that happen over and over again when I've been out and it's like, God, is this going to be one of those? And so
I do think you had a target on your back for sure because you're just very noticeable. And so if you are being at all rambunctious or seeming any type of way, you're going to be seen first and more than anybody else in the room. So I can totally see that.
Yeah.
How long were you in the doghouse with Kim?
Not at all. I mean, she bailed me out.
But she wasn't mad at all.
I mean, of course you're upset because it's embarrassing, but it wasn't like
I would have whooped your ass.
I mean,
I would have whooped your ass.
Love them the most when they deserve it the least.
Well, that's
Jim Tressel.
That's true. Oh, Tressel.
Yeah, Confucius.
What do you think about Tressel? Doesn't everybody just love Tressel?
It's the best.
He is the best,
to ever
isn't he?
do it. Of course.
Yeah.
The best.
That was a hard thing that happened with him in Ohio State.
It's brutal.
Yeah.
Permanently changed my image of Ohio State when I went down.
Really? What did you?
I was in the room when it happened. Like
you were?
Yeah. I was working there. Grad assistant.
Is there anything you can share about being in the room?
It was tough because you're sitting there and it's like, you know, I mean, we knew something was coming. We didn't know what. You know, there was a thought he'd get suspended and he'd get a chance to come back. But, you know, then it got to the point where there was a Sports Illustrated article that was coming out. And I kept getting hit up by media people saying, hey, you know, this is supposed to come out on Tuesday. You know, this is what it looks like. This is the mock of it, you know, like the write-up. And I'd read it. And it was just weird. And then all of a sudden it was Sunday night and Tress, you know, had to fly back from Breckenridge, you know, with his family, middle of the night. They made him come back because the board of trustees was going to fire him on Monday. And it was just like, it was insane. It was crazy. I mean, we were right on the edge of the season. The season was about to start. So it was a couple months out from the season. It was tough. Mm-hmm.
He was one of my favorites, actually.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're rounding into 60 minutes. I could sit here with you for another hour. It's been a delight.
Yes.
You know, you're very authentic. You're unapologetically you, which I totally resonate with. And I really appreciate your time.
Always.
And your candor.
Of course.
And I can't wait to be on your podcast. I'm going to tear it up.
We go live, so
Honey,
get your mind right.
listen, I can go live.
Get your mind right.
Okay. And for everybody out there, please follow me on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. And until next time, keep moving.